Welcome to Transform Now, the podcast brought to you by SS&C Blue Prism. Enterprise AI isn't just a tool, it's the heartbeat of smart organizations like yours, helping to reinvent work to deliver higher growth, more customers, and better experiences. Join us as we discover how AI-powered work orchestration and automation is making things better for everyone: customers, employees, shareholders, and most importantly, you. Let's get into the show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now. I'm Brad Hairston.
And I'm Michael Marchuk.
And this is the weekly pulse check, taking a look at what's popping in the news around automation and AI.
And there's
Michael,
always something popping.
There's always something popping. We could do this every single day and we'd have something newsworthy.
Something more to talk about.
Unfortunately, we don't have time to do that. So we'll do it weekly as always. All right, I've got 4 articles for us to cover today. The first one, and this is actually not an article, it's a blog, but it's a blog from someone who's very prominent in the AI world, and that's Mr. Sam Altman. So he has a blog, and he posted this last week a piece that he called The Great Singularity.
The Gentle Singularity.
Yeah. I love that word, by the way. It's one of my favorite words. For those who don't really fully understand what it means, I mean, in today's times, it's essentially a hypothetical point in time at which technology, the growth in technology becomes uncontrollable and irreversible, resulting in sometimes bad consequences for humans, sometimes good consequences. But the whole point is you get to a place where we cannot change the direction things are heading. And so that word comes up a lot. Sam says it's the gentle singularity. So he has a very strong point of view on where things are going. And so anytime he writes a blog post, I think it gets a lot of attention. I found it pretty interesting. What did you think about the things he had to say?
A lot, actually. So first of all, we'll start with this singularity thing. So I guess I'm from the scientific background. When I think of singularity, the first thing that comes to mind is not AI. The first thing that comes to mind is a black hole. And that idea that the singularity is a black hole that is just, infinitely dense and nothing comes out of it. It just sucks it all up. Right. Maybe that's why they are the same, because AI seems like it's sucking up everything. But it's interesting. But regardless, he did have some really good points to put in there. And actually, one of the quotes I thought was really, really interesting. And actually, I've been thinking about it in sort of a different way. He says, a subsistence farmer from 1,000 years ago would look at what many of us do and say we have fake jobs. And I think that we're really good at playing games. We're really just playing games to entertain ourselves because we have plenty of food and unimaginable luxuries. And I hope we will look at the jobs 1,000 years in the future, and they will think, we'll think that they're fake jobs. And no doubt they'll feel incredibly important and satisfied to the people doing them. So it's weird how perspective changes. We look back, and I thought about this too. If, my ancestors, your ancestors saw that what we do for a living, and the fact that we don't toil out in the sun, making sure that the hard ground is yielding crops to allow us to live through next week, they would say the same thing. Like, you guys got it cushy, really, really cushy. Yeah. So anyway, so interesting idea about where AI is, how it's evolved, and where it could be going. I think it's, like you said, anytime Sam Altman makes comments, whatever, he's putting out there, it becomes newsworthy for a reason, because he's on the edge of the cutting edge. Yeah. And I don't know, what did you think about some of these things he mentioned in here?
I think he made several interesting comments. One of them I really liked is he said, in some sense, ChatGPT is already more powerful than any human who has ever lived. Yeah. Hundreds of millions of people rely on it every single day. And he says, a small new capability can create a hugely positive impact. But then he also says a small misalignment multiplied by hundreds of millions of people can cause a great deal of negative impact. So I appreciate the fact that he's not trying to sugarcoat it and say it's all good. Right. He's recognizing the magnitude of it. I mean, his company really did, pivot us toward this new generation, this new technology revolution. And, it is something that's impacting almost every aspect of society. And it's interesting also just to hear what he thinks about the coming decade. He thinks the 30s are going to be substantially different than the 2020s. And he talks about we don't know how far beyond human intelligence we can go, but one thing we do know, intelligence and energy, ideas, and the ability to make ideas happen are going to become wildly abundant. I like that. I thought that was a good way
I agree
about, where we're headed. And then he gives a couple of mandates. What did you think about the 2 mandates that he closed his blog post out with, things that he think we all have to collectively do?
Yeah, I mean, his 2, I'll read them so that people understand what we're talking about. The first one is to solve the alignment problem, meaning we can robustly guarantee that we get AI systems that learn and act towards what we collectively really want over the long term, versus what we have seen with both hallucinations to start with. But also, if you think about the potential, and again, going back to sort of that dystopian movie viewpoint of how AI becomes smart and then no longer needs people type of thing, that is something we'll have to figure out how to get the AI that we want at the end of the day. And that what we want part is, again, kind of slippery, because if you talk with a defense contractor, their AI may look very much different than perhaps someone who's maybe an ailing elderly person who needs companionship. Again, very, very different. So the alignment problem is not just what we as a society want, it's where we think we as individuals can leverage that. And the second one is the idea is making the focus on making super intelligence cheap, widely available, and not too concentrated with any person, company, or country. That is a challenge, because while I think we can adapt very quickly to say that, well, if I look at it right now, it's relatively cheap in terms of there's a free version of ChatGPT that we can all leverage right now anywhere in the world. But the reality is that I need a computer to do that. I need internet connectivity to do that. I need to know English to do that. So there's a lot of stuff that comes about where it's good for a very select number of people, but maybe not for everybody. So getting that next part of decentralizing it, so it's not just OpenAI, it's not just Meta, it becomes something that becomes ubiquitous, allows not one company to drive it, and it also allows every person to be able to have access to it. So it'll be interesting to see where this all goes. He made mention earlier in the article about we may have to make the first 100 million or so humanoid robots to help us with our work and whatever. But after that, it'll be okay, because they'll be able to make themselves. So lots of perspectives on what the future could look like within this one blog post.
Yeah, that point about making super intelligence cheap and widely available, he's clearly thinking back to the roots of OpenAI, as the name implies, OpenAI, AI for everyone.
Right.
That was really where they started. Of course, they took a little turn and now are looking at aiming for a for-profit model. Can't blame them too much for that. Did you also catch in the first point about alignment? Did you catch the point he made about social media?
Yeah.
That we don't want this to be like social media, which started off with some, good kind of objectives, and then somewhere along the way, the algorithms started being designed to create, addictive patterns. And
again, this is the alignment piece. For depending on who you are, that could be a very good thing.
Yeah.
many, and where it could be a terrible thing.
Yeah.
So, for companies who want to keep their eyeballs on their platform, this is a wonderful thing. These algorithms being able to serve up exactly what people want and keep them on our platform and keep them, as you say, addicted to it.
Yeah.
Versus maybe as a parent with your teenage son or daughter, thinking, actually, I don't want them becoming a vegetable head, just scrolling endlessly on their feed.
Yeah, I actually think the call out was a shot at Mark Zuckerberg.
No doubt.
We talked about last week is trying to poach OpenAI's employees.
No doubt.
I think he was making a reference there. But all right, let's go to article number 2. This is from Andreessen Horowitz, and they posted an article titled "What Working Means in the Era of AI Apps." Now, Andreessen Horowitz, most people know they're a privately held venture capital firm with a very paltry $42 billion in assets under management. And I always pay attention when I see the Andreessen Horowitz name come up, because they're just involved in, they have their finger on the pulse of what's happening in Silicon Valley, and they invest in so many companies, and they consider investing in so many others. So when they come forward and they make observations about what they're seeing, I think it's very informative. It's usually, they're ahead of the curve in terms of understanding what's happening.
Yep.
So this article is largely about what they see with startups and the fact that they're working a lot faster than ever. And both businesses and consumers are very willing to pay for these new products. What did you think about some of the big takeaways from this post?
Well, again, the perspective they're going for is talking with a lot of founders, because obviously, as you say, they manage funds, and they do a lot of investment in Silicon Valley to see this. So some of the perspectives that they gave were related to how they see companies who are now creating these AI startups and how they see them growing over time. So the part that they're looking in here, though, is what this means with the apps that they're building out, is that the expectations and the realities of how AI is jump starting is pretty startling. Talking between, they say that here that the median enterprise company in our sample data set reached more than $2 million of ARR in its first year. So again, this is their median is getting about $2 million of revenue in their first year. That's pretty amazing. Considering, these are companies that start with zero, like literally zero. And within a year, they've got, millions coming in. So there's definitely a different perspective. This is not the old economy where you talk about the idea, we have these issues with, longevity and the good old days when the companies do this, our price earnings ratios and stuff. You really have to evaluate these organizations in a different way, because they're able to generate revenue so quickly. And it does make a difference between B2B versus B2C. But the reality is that this is happening now, and good ideas with some funding to make them happen can really create viable companies relatively quickly, leveraging some of the technology that exists right now. So it's amazing.
Interesting to see what they said about the path from 0 to 1 million. What they used to see, the best in class time get to that 1 million now is on the lower end of the growth they're seeing. So companies are getting there so much faster than ever before.
Yeah, they're saying that's the lower quartile, is if you can only make $1 million of ARR in your first year, you're on the bottom, because the best in class ones, the top quartile, they're pulling in almost $6 million a year in their first year. And to me, that's incredible, and how they do that. So we are definitely seeing a difference in how organizations are growing. And I say organizations in a very loose sense, because these companies are generally going to be a handful of people, which gets back to some of our earlier discussions we've had over the past several weeks. related to the fact that at some point, there is going to be a one-person, $1 billion company that leverages all this technology to make all this happen. So just interesting times we live in.
Yeah. Any other takeaways from the article that you found interesting?
I guess what we talked about right now is that the revenue benchmarks for B2C are outpacing B2B, which I think is also very interesting, because when we think of companies buying from other companies, I tend to think, at least, that these are much larger ticket items, and there's a deeper relationship, and there's a spending pattern that goes in there, and so there's a volume of orders and whatnot. But when you start talking about, hey, if I release an app or I release something out to the public, and tomorrow it's available to several billion people, it doesn't take a very large percentage for you to get to that $1 million ARR or $6 million ARR if you're on the top quartile. So the whole B2C thing is really taking even more advantages of volume, and the fact that we, as a collective, we have all been trained that it's, hey, I can, for only 99 cents, I can buy this app, or I can get some value out here. That's enough value for me to be able to take advantage of this, and I feel good about spending that money, or the $20 a month for OpenAI. Now, this enough. Like I get $20 worth of value. Sure, I'll spend the money on it. So that's where B2C now has become even bigger force when coming out with these generative AI platforms, because we don't have to rely on corporate buying to be successful. You can actually sell directly to consumers and be even more successful. Right. So that's one thing that really stuck out to me.
Yeah. Good stuff. Okay, well, let's move on to article number 3. This one comes from Reuters, and it's titled "Disney and Universal Sue Image Creator Midjourney for Copyright Infringement." You know what they say, Michael? Another day, another lawsuit. Around IP or copyright infringement in the world of Gen AI. So Midjourney, we haven't really talked a whole lot about Midjourney in recent weeks, but they made a name for themselves very quickly in the image generation space. So you create an image that looks like this, and it creates these wonderfully vivid images. They also got a lot of notoriety in the early days of Gen AI because they initially only had 11 people in their company, and they got to 100 million in revenue with 11 people. So they're a little bigger now. They're about 130 people. So they're still small. And they're, I think, in the neighborhood of 300 million in revenue, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
But now they're in trouble because they, and let me read the quote from Walt Disney and Comcast, the lawsuit. It says that Midjourney is a bottomless pit of plagiarism. Those are the exact words. And they're obviously upset. They feel like some of the best known characters and copyrighted characters from either of these organizations have been used to train Midjourney and are showing up in their images. Darth Vader, as an example.
Right.
So what do you think about this article? What anything new or different about it that you pulled out versus the horde of other lawsuit stories we talked about?
I guess the first thing that stuck out to me was the response or the approach that Midjourney has responded, at least in the past, maybe not to this particular lawsuit, but has responded in the past to this. According to the article here, back in 2022, they had an interview with Forbes, and the Midjourney CEO at the time said that they built the company's database performing, quote, a big scrape of the internet, unquote.
A very large scrape.
Exactly, a very large scrape of the internet. And when they asked a little bit more about it, they said, what about the consent of the artists who were covered by any kind of copyright to this? And he said, well, there really isn't any way to get 100 million images and know where they're coming from. So basically throwing everything, like, well, how can I possibly know all where these images are coming from and whatnot?
Yeah.
So to me, it's very obvious that they are going out to pull obviously copyrighted images and being able to regenerate copyrighted images with their text prompts, again, leads one to believe that perhaps the training that they used and the way they got their training data probably wasn't appropriate.
Yeah.
So this is a big issue for them. So that of that subscriptions, they're making $300 million in revenue last year. One has to wonder how much of that is now at risk in legal fees and other kind of copyright violations that they're going to be found. And this is just through Walt Disney. So
yeah,
who knows where else these characters are going to get pulled from, or these images are pulled from, that would then, if this goes forward and they win, could basically shut down Midjourney, because there's no way they could afford to pay all of the damages associated with it. So it's interesting.
It is. And Midjourney was in the news on a more positive note as well. And that's actually our fourth and final article. This one comes from TechCrunch, and it's titled "Midjourney Launches Its First AI Video Generation Model, V1." So V1 is now in the realm of these video generation tools that have been hitting the market, in abundance here in recent months. And we'll have to get a look at it as soon as we can. I'm sure it's going to blow us away, given that Midjourney was already known for its graphical capabilities and the quality of the images it creates. They, much like some of the others, give you the ability to prompt it on what to create. They also enable you to upload an image, and then it can create a 4 to 5 second video based on that image. That sounds pretty interesting. I can't wait to play around with that. What did we learn more about Midjourney and their video model aspirations from this article, Michael?
So I guess part of it comes from sort of Midjourney's creative background. I mean, they've always been known as a very creative. So for folks who want to be creative in their own minds, they can leverage their models and do some really interesting things with it. So Midjourney has always been known for creating very, very dynamic imagery.
Yeah.
And so bringing this into a video world, I think that gives them an opportunity to either A, show that they still have it and are able to translate what they learned from image production into more video production work. But knowing that we've got some of the others that have been released, like Google's VO3, which I absolutely love, but Sora and Runway. I mean, we've got a lot of really good competitors in this market of generating. Like we have the Chinese versions with Kling and several others that are, they put out fantastic video. So this is a rapidly evolving area. One of the things I thought was interesting with, at least within this particular model, is that while all of them generate the 5-second versions of the video, this one you can actually extend the video 4 seconds at a time up to a maximum of like 21 seconds is what they said. So that could be interesting too, to create a longer scene, if you will. Think from a movie or an ad or something like that. You create a longer scene rather than having it be clipped at 5 seconds, where you have to either change camera angles or whatever that to get some kind of continuity. All this is really interesting. I think it's, again, all these models will get to the point where they're going to be able to generate longer and longer versions. But it's interesting to see how this is something that they're forethinking. We expect that we're going to be able to extend our videos. So perhaps that creativity is going to go into how those extensions work on every 5-second video, but also in create the very first set of that.
The article notes that from the CEO, it says that their aspiration is ultimately to create, with AI, create real-time open world simulations. What does that mean to you? I'm not sure I can wrap my brain around that.
So I think video games. There are there, like the Unreal Engine, was one that's a very popular world creator, if you will, and it does a fantastic job with that too, creating really lifelike, real-time type of imagery within an environment. So getting to that next step of saying, instead of having to define that kind of imagery ahead of time, saying I'm to create this world, and now I will use an engine like Unreal Engine to render it for you in real time as you're walking, running, flying through it.
Yeah.
This would then take the next step of saying, well, I will create the world as you enter it. As you appear to the next stage, it will now go through the creation process and then render it for you as well. So it could be very, very interesting. It could lead to all kinds of new experiences for people, especially in the gaming world, to be able to experience something like you'll never be able to replay the same game because you're in a different kind of world every time you approach it. So that could be really, really interesting. Again, I don't know where they're going with the technology other than from the video perspective of it, but the idea that they could take that kind of technology to open up the expanse of where first person kind of gaming can happen. I think that's pretty exciting. Not specifically for me, because I don't necessarily play those kind of games, but the idea that this is a gaming genre that a lot of people are really very interested in, and it could really open up a lot of some interesting things.
Interesting. Well, Midjourney says that it's going to charge more for video generation than a typical image generation. I think it's 8 times more.
Yeah.
So if you're a subscriber, you're going to run out of your daily, your monthly allotment pretty quickly. And unlike Google and some of the others, it doesn't appear they have a free option to give it a try. I think you have to get the minimum subscription of like $10 a month if you want to check it out. I'm sure.
Well, this way you can create copyrighted movies now that would be with copyrighted characters. So you do more copyright infringement.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for this Pulse Check. Remember that we publish another podcast with a guest every week. Be sure and check that out. Otherwise, we will see you back next week for the Pulse Check. Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to Transform Now, the podcast from SS&C Blue Prism. You can find all of our episodes on your favorite podcast channel, as well as YouTube. To stay on top of the hottest topics in the world of enterprise AI, subscribe now. The future of work is here.